Broadcasting from the KMF Collective Studio, it's time for the Keep Moving Forward podcast. Join us every week as we dive into the stories of remarkable current and former athletes that have transitioned into the real world. Now here's your host, Katie Galley.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 216th episode of the Keep Moving Forward podcast. I'm your host, Katie Galley. Today in the KMF Collective Studio, I have with me founder of Beyond Athlete Life, Pierre Collura. How are you doing, Pierre?
Yo, what up, Katie? Really glad to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here too. Thanks so much for stopping by and sharing your story with us today. I'm super excited to dive in. Yeah, absolutely. So Pierre, just to kind of get the ball rolling and to kind of learn a little bit about your background, I wonder, where did you grow up and how, if at all, was your childhood shaped by athletics?
All right. Long story short, I was adopted by a family that I had an Italian father and a Finnish mother. Grew up in Italy all my life, but then when I decided to compete, then I started to compete for Finland actually. So I competed in laser sailing, which is a Olympic sport, and then I don't know, that's pretty much it for my story. It's been an amazing experience, honestly. Such a privilege to be able to do what you love in your life, I guess. From that perspective.
Yeah, really. So, from that time that you found so did you compete in the Olympics, or was it just like an Olympic dream that you had?
No, I actually managed to get there in 2008. Took a lot of work, and also a sprinkle of luck, let's say like that. And I managed to, fulfill my dream in 2008, and it has been an absolute honor to compete for Finland and actually be there and see all these giants of different sports and be so close to them. I know I'm kind of like fanboying right now, but that's how I felt at the time and still feel right now. So it was amazing.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, having that dream realized and then being surrounded by people that you've looked up to probably your whole life and kind of aspired to be, so then actually being in their presence and being able to compete around them would be amazing.
Yeah, it's just it's such a privilege to see even how they approach the game, because I understand, sports can be very different, but I guess you can always get some insights in connecting with these, champions and really see how it is that they approach the game. And it was honestly amazing.
Yeah. And so for you, Pierre, when you initially kind of set yourself on this Olympic path, how did it begin? How did you discover your initial sports? And how did you kind of get introduced into the world of sports that set you on this Olympic path?
I grew up in this small city in Italy that is called Desenzano, which is on this, I think at least, amazing place called Lake Garda, which is a small but beautiful lake in the north of Italy. And when I was young, about 8 years old, I used to do many different types of sports, right? Mm-hmm. But then I got interested one summer and said, hey, I want to try sailing out. So my parents were like, all right, we sign you up for a course. None of my parents actually did sailing before, so I was the first in the family to give a stab to this new activity. And from there on, I just loved it because, it's a beautiful sport that allows you to be in the middle of the nature. And then because it has both a physical as well as a strategic component, on top of the fact that you have to kind of adapt to the environment. So there is an element of unpredictability, which I find very fascinating, Mm-hmm. And I got hooked, I just got hooked and loved it. And then as I progressed with my career, somehow I discovered that I was actually pretty good at it. But most importantly, I was passionate about it, because I think you can be good at something, but you got to do things because you love them, right? And I got also the opportunity to follow that dream, right? So I guess looking at the reality of athletes, not everybody has the chance to pursue their passions wholeheartly. So I was very lucky that I could do it. And so I just pursued it to the point where it just kept moving forward and forward and forward until I managed to get to the Olympics, which was, the culmination of this whole, journey.
Mm-hmm. Man, I love that. I mean, finding this sport that you love so much and then having the opportunity to really reach that pinnacle, reach the highest point that you could and going to the Olympics. And so, Pierre, can you kind of dive into a little bit about the sport of sailing? So is it an individual sport? Were you with kind of a team of people? How does it work?
Well, basically, we have different type of boats that you can compete in. That some of the division is based on gender, other divisions are based on the weight of the sailor, right?
Okay.
In my case, I sailed first in the optimist class, which is a class that is common for like young kids. You can compete until you are like something like 15. And then from that, I moved into the laser class, which is the Olympic class. But when you get into basically the class, you can have different sizes of sails, right? Because when you're younger and you're not heavy enough, it can be a little bit too tough if you have too big of a sail, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got into the laser 4.7 and then climbed from that until I reached the laser standard, which is the Olympic, like size sail. And that's kind of like the journey that I went through. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And it's an individual.
Go ahead.
And it's an individual. In my case, it was individual, right?
Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting because just to kind of unpack a little bit about what the sport of sailing is, because I mean, it's really, there's so many different sports, I guess, that any person could take up in their life. And then it's just amazing to hear of all the different sports that there are, how you found the sport that you love and why you chose to pursue it. I mean, it's just really, it's just an interesting thing. It's really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Pierre, from there, I mean, getting to pursue that passion of yours, falling into sailing, and then getting it to take it to that next level. At what time in your life did you realize, okay, this is a sport that I want to take to the next level, and then really started to see yourself on this path to the Olympics? Or was it just, did you see yourself maybe going, competing at something before the Olympics? Or how did you see this kind of Olympic journey or Olympic dream start to pan out?
Well, to be honest with you, like when I began sailing, I honestly sucked at it. I was the last of the group. I was horrible, honestly. So, but I guess what I had going for me was the fact that I just loved being in the boat and try things out, right? Mm-hmm. So I just ended up spending so much time inside the boat until I became better and better and better, right? Mm-hmm. But then I guess it's been a little bit of an organic process up until a certain point where, I got to the point where it was like, hey, dude, you're actually doing like good results and you love what you do. So why don't we try for the Olympics? And it was a big decision, of course, because I was still very young. I was, I think, like one of the youngest, like at least in the fleet when I competed in the Olympics. So it was a bit early maybe, but I said like, hey, I want to try it. And so I tried and fortunately, I succeeded. It went very well, the whole process. But I think it was like a mix of an organic decision combined with, at one point, you have to make the conscious choice of saying, "Hey, I'm going to train seriously," because the training regime like changed drastically once you decide to go for that. So
yeah. And so for sailing specifically with your training, is it the majority of your training? Does it that take place on a boat out in the water, or is there on land training? Like, do you have to be pretty physically fit to do it too? What does the training look like?
Yeah, in my class, actually, you have to be very fit. So, like, it's a composition of both on water training, which was more like let's say a technical component, right? Mm-hmm. And then it had to be supplemented with some like hardcore like training on land. So, because basically the way our races work is that we have like 2 like starts a day, and each start can last like about an hour or an hour and a half even sometimes. So you have to be able to keep your like physical effort for about 3 hours a day, right? And keep it at peak performance. So it has to be like a lot of endurance training and try to be in the best shape possible, because at the end of it all, like, because there is also like a mental component, right? Because if you're actually tired, you don't think clearly. Yeah. So you also have to be fit, because you have to keep your mind active. So because you need to understand how the wind changes, maybe because usually the wind changes some direction, sometimes. So you have to adapt your strategy to all these changes. So you have to actually be awake as you race. Mm-hmm. And that's why you have to also like train on your physical side, aside from just pure physical effort point of view.
Yeah. And I mean, that's it. That does make sense. It seems like it's a very obviously physically demanding sport, but a really strategic sport too. You have to be aware of what's going on and kind of adapt on the fly.
Yeah, definitely. You need to be aware of the where the wind is coming from. Is there any current? Where is the rest of the fleet? How can you protect your position? So that's one of the two elements that really made me fall in love with the sport, because you can think a little bit throughout this whole process.
Yeah. I love that. So you can't just, you don't just turn off your brain. You go all in, and you have to be really immersed in what's going on. And that's awesome. And so Pierre, from there, learning all about sailing and then setting yourself on this path to have the opportunity present itself for you to go to the Olympics. How did that come about? Did you have a qualifying race, or how did you end up finally qualifying for the Olympics?
Well, to go to the Olympics, there is a qualifier that the Olympic Committee sets for the country. In my case, like in the laser class, you have only one competitor per country that can participate to the Olympics for your specific sailing class, right? So in my case, I guess, just to give you a bit of a background information about the world of sailing, or at least how it was when I competed. Well, it's the kind of sport, where you're required to train like a professional, right? But unfortunately, at least at the time, there wasn't the business infrastructure around it that enabled you to get compensated professionally for your training, right? So in my case, like, I was very lucky, as like many other competitors in the sport at the time, that I was in a position where my family could like help me support many of the costs, right, that you have to sustain in order to compete and train at that level. So one thing that I want to really acknowledge is the fact that I guess if I wasn't in such a lucky position as I was at the time, I don't think I could have pursued the Olympics. But then fortunately, I managed to find myself at least in this amazing situation, and took full advantage. So, I had to train hard, and then like just participate to the qualifier, and then if you qualify, you go. So that's pretty much it.
Wow. I mean, that is really cool. Like you said, it's kind of like you had to have the stars all perfectly aligned, but then they did for you. And so then you were able to step through that door of opportunity.
Yeah, I think like my whole overall philosophy on life is the fact that you can, of course, with effort, you can do a lot, but to make major results in your life, there is also an element of like good luck, Like, for example, in my case, if I just look at my story, I was born in Madagascar, and I got adopted by a European family that was like well off, But if I look back at the beginning of my story, I don't think I could have had, the same opportunities if I just grew up in Madagascar, So just there is such an element of, good fortune, like in a sense that I'm super appreciative about, when you can just, have good things in your life, and I think you should take full advantage of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but
no, it does, absolutely. I mean, having it's the right things happening at the right time, and then too, I mean, when you're a child, you didn't have control over being adopted, but now as you grow and you mature, and then you learn, okay, things are coming up, things are being presented to me, then it's your choice to walk through those doors of opportunity, and whether you're going to seize those opportunities. And you said, like, it's sometimes luck of the draw, sometimes things just happen to fall into place, but more often than not too, you have to decide whether or not you're going to take charge and move forward with these chances.
Absolutely. I'm in total agreement with you.
Yeah. So Pierre, I mean, from there, you qualify for the Olympics, you get there and you're just starstruck. It's just the sheer awe of being at the Olympic Games, representing Finland and having this chance. And so do you remember competing? Do you have, or was it just kind of all a whirlwind because you were so excited?
It's a mix of the two. So, I mean, there are moments that they just skip them because you're just starstruck. You're fanboying all around and just loving it. And also it helped, I guess, like the fact that I didn't really have huge expectations for the Olympics. I didn't go there saying, hey, I think I can realistically go for the medal, because just the guys that were competing at the time, I mean, they were really like monster geniuses. So I was just lucky to be there in a sense, I did work hard for it, but it's just a mix of the two. There are like many beautiful memories that I have, but also some moments just looking back, they just went through, because it was just like starstruck.
Mm-hmm. But too, you get to, like, now you get that chance where you can reflect back, and some things, you remember them with that, with that reverence of, wow, I was there, and now getting that kind of renewed perspective. And so Pierre, though, at that time, coming off of the Olympics, and that high and that just elation of, wow, I did this, I went to the Olympic Games. So once they ended, coming into that next transitional period of your life, did you have a plan for what you wanted to do next? Did you want to try and continue to pursue sailing? What happened?
I guess like the first question, after you finish the Olympics, is like, what's next?
Yeah.
You've invested so many years of your life in preparation for it. So I think it's good to have some like time off to reflect. So I took, I guess, like a couple of months just to sit around and think and say, hey, do I want to do it again? Because, it was like not only challenging for me, but also challenging for my family that was taking care of all, the expenses. So, but then we decided and saying, hey, let's just go for it, So I tried to like qualify for 2012, but then in 2012, several things happened. First of all, I just want to give my hat off to the other competitor that went instead of me in the 2012 Olympics, which is Matthias Lindfors. And we're super good friends, but he wiped the floor with me, man. It is so good. And he was absolutely flawless competition, and he managed to qualify. And so at that point, I tried again for the Olympics, didn't qualify, but then in that moment, unfortunately, it was kind of almost simultaneous to the financial crisis. So what happened fundamentally was that my father's business went bankrupt, right? So we lost everything, and it was a horrible moment. And, when you compete in a sport where the economic sustainability of what you do really depends on someone else's financial well-being, right? And in this case, my father's business, or at least his wealth, when you lose all that, then you can't go forward, So after 2012, then I just had to retire, because it just didn't make any sense at all to continue with the game,
Wow. And so, it's one thing to kind of choose to step away, and of course you chose to step away from sailing. It was a personal choice, but really too, it was having someone qualify over you, and then too having the effects of that the financial crisis had on your family. So it was all these circumstances that kind of made you push you into the decision of, okay, I have to step away from sailing now. And so how did you navigate that transition of kind of having the sport, it decided for you that the sport, you would no longer be a part of it in pursuit of that Olympic dream?
Well, first of all, I guess the non-qualification, it was easy to come to terms with. It just was simple. Matti did an outstanding job, and he deserved to be there. So, that wasn't really the hard part, right? But the stepping away from the sport completely, that's a whole different game, right? Because I think when you're an athlete and you push yourself to go through, to try to reach really the top of your sports, you're investing so much of your identity and who you are in that sport. So it's really hard to see yourself into another light, So that's something that is really hard. Mm-hmm. And so the transition for me, it was pretty, I guess, in a sense, I was sort of lucky. In a sense, although things were very horrible, but I was lucky that I didn't really have many choices in front of me, because my family was in financial struggle, and I needed to figure out ways to help them out, right? So it was really the only option that I had in front of me was either get a job or start a business. And since when you get a job at the entry level as an athlete with no experience in business or anything else, whatever, so it's the only way to, find a way to earn enough to sustain your family is just to start a business, and you got to figure things out. So I guess from a moment that is really negative and dark, there is somehow I guess still lucky again that I didn't have to overthink things, and I just needed to motor through that moment and really give my best to get my family out of that situation.
Wow. And that's really kind of black and white, but an incredible thought to have. It's just, okay, I have to get my family out of the situation. So what am I going to do? Am I either going to get a job or going to start a business? Okay, start a business. And you just go in with that. And so Pierre, from there, so you, I guess, and at that time when you decided, did you decide then right then that you were going to start your own business?
Yeah, I just ran a very simple pro and con, kind of like, notepad with a pen and two different colors, and just figure out, okay, that's the only way that I needed to go through, because, like, if you get to an entry-level job, you can earn enough maybe for yourself, but if you have zero experience, what can you do, right? And the only thing that could be scaled up, if I asked myself, if I start now getting to a job, where will I be in a year from now? Will I be able to take care of my family a little bit and to help out, And with the job, I said, no, there's no freaking way that I can, build it that is big enough so that the three of us can live off well. So the business was the only logical choice that I had in front of me. And I said, just let's go and let's give it a shot. Like, if I fail, it doesn't get much worse than where I am right now, but at least I give it a shot,
Wow. Absolutely, man. I love that. And so Pierre, then what business did you decide to start?
Well, I started a small translation company, which actually was the business that my father was into previously. But I decided to start it myself because, actually me and Dad, I love him with all my heart, but we are not really good business partners because we have very different ways of approaching the business. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. And then if I'm right, then I can say, hey, Dad, I showed you that my way works as well. So I started this small translation company that we were servicing local businesses with their translation needs. In a sense, one thing that has cut a little bit the learning curve was, of course, having my father there, that I could ask some questions on how to do things, but everything I needed to figure out from scratch, because I started with zero experience, so I needed to really understand how do you find the right suppliers, how do you find the right first customers, and what is their need, how can I help them out, And so there was all this roller coaster of going through a lot of trial and error and figuring things out, but just looking back, it's just been an amazing experience, which, a lot of the characteristics that you have as an athlete, or these skills that you've learned, it's just resilience, hard work, just pushing through the pain sometimes, it really helped out. And it was, fortunately, then I managed to build something that was profitable and successful. So and it was good.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head in that transitional piece. This, it's kind of synonymous, the athlete and entrepreneurial mindset. That's so many similarities. And so once you see that everything you learned as an athlete can help transfer over into that entrepreneurial journey that you want to go on, then it's just lights out. You can go all in. And so then Pierre, from there, having you kind of reinvigorating with your dad, his business, and then from there, so you had that business. What happened next that led you to where you are today with Beyond Athlete Life?
Okay, so basically, the business that I started was in 2012, right? And I started it with Marco, which, by the way, is another retired athlete. So the two of us tried to figure things out up until 2015, where we just sold the business. It was doing okay, financially. We were doing about $300K a year in terms of revenue. But then it was just out of control because we just didn't know how to manage it right. It was profitable, but we felt that there was something inside that wasn't really working well. So we sold the business off to someone that was more interested in running the company and taking over the assets. And then we started a new business that was in the translation technology, actually, field. So it was still similar, but with more a tech imprint, and then grew it up. And as I started to grow this second business, and reflecting also sometimes on my life, because I'm a little bit of a philosophical dude, so I like to think about things, And so I just looked into the fact that, hey, there are so many things that I wish I would have known the first time around when I transitioned from the sports to the world of business, Because as I grew the second company, it was, there were so many times that I was just sitting and I was like, I wish someone would have told me so, that it would have saved me from so much pain. And so, for many years, I said, hey, I want to get into it. But then, last year, I just said, hey, I just have to do it because I cannot leave so many athletes like just alone, or at least like there needs to be a better way to give support for this transition if they choose to get into the world of entrepreneurship, because at the time when I retired, actually, there was no support at all. I understand that, the Olympic Committee and the Federation didn't have such a sophisticated business structure as they have now, because right now, actually, there are some programs, but at the time it was like, just do it yourself. So, yeah.
Man, that's such an incredible story of deciding that you're going to start your own business and then selling it. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to do it again. But then having now that newfound knowledge of what didn't I know before that now I do know. And then taking it even a step further and realizing, man, I want to help people just like me who are in the situation I was in. But now I have this all this experience, and I don't want someone to have to go through this in the way I did. And so now being able to parlay that and help people in that next phase of their journey. And so, Pierre, when you had that realization and seeing at the time that the Olympics maybe didn't have those programs in place, and so wanting to fill that void for someone or be that kind of person to help them through their own experiences, how did that lead you to starting in the last year Beyond Athlete Life?
Well, it's just really like, because as an entrepreneur, 90% of the times, like when you look at something, there is like that little voice inside of you and say, yeah, I can do it better. So fundamentally, like I just said, hey, like I let's see if I can apply the skills that I have learned as an entrepreneur to develop a useful solution for athletes that go through this process and maybe helping them out. So it took a lot of actually I was reading a lot about it since I think it was 2017. I was just starting to get into the space, right? But I then never took action because I felt like, hey, I'm so busy with my businesses and stuff. But now that things have at least, are in a moment where, the machine is working well. And of course, there is still a lot of learning and optimization that we can do, but at least it's very stable, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, hey, I have some time that I can dedicate to this. And I think at least I grew up in a house where my father was very active with human rights. He was active against apartheid in South Africa and with, racial issues. And he hammered into my head, this idea that I actually it's also borrowed from the Italian constitution, the third article that says that, you have a duty which you cannot delegate for, political, social, and economic solidarity, right? Mm. So I said, you just got to get into it. You got to do your part, because sometimes it's as bad as not acting. If you are in a position to do good and don't do it, it's not good. So I just feel this urge inside of me, and I said, hey, it's just a contribution. It's not like my project. I don't think it's not the best way to go about it. It's just a contribution to help people out to take one step forward. So it's not the way to go to $1 million, because I'm not even there myself, right? But it's just a way, hey, I give you a nudge in the right direction. So let's go together through this process.
I love that. That's such a really unique perspective to have. I mean, it's not trying to change the narrative and completely alter people's lives. It's, okay, how can I equip them to take just one step forward in their own path, wherever it might lead them? And again, being able to draw on your own experiences and knowing firsthand that is true, just wanting guidance or help in taking that first step. And so, Pierre, so kind of bringing it full circle, what is Beyond Athlete Life? Is it its own business aside from the other one that you have? Is it just kind of a blog, a podcast? What is it?
Well, it's actually just recently I started to give it a little bit more of a better shape, because in the beginning it started with me just sharing brain dumping ideas that I had in my head, especially on Instagram, right? Mm-hmm. But then, I said, hey, I want to structure things a little bit better. So I started to connect with athletes and just give my time and say, hey, if you have any business questions, just ask them to me. So I started to connect with them. But then, lately, I've run a lot of interviews and trying to understand what is the need of an athlete, that is out there, And so instead of what I've realized is that the universe of athletes that want to get into the business, it's so diverse, right? And because I feel that I'm just in general, I'm not such a smart guy. I feel pretty dumb. I know a lot less relative to what it is that I can know. I just said, hey, instead of me being the the guy who tells you how to do things, because I don't think it would be fair to tell somebody how it is that you can do things if because it's not necessarily the knowledge that I have is applicable to their situation. What I decided to do is said, hey, I'm just going to document the challenges that I go through on a daily basis. So maybe by observing my thought process and the way I approach things, you can get a different perspective. So it's not a rule on how to do things, but a different point of view that you can use to compare this point of view to your own, and then, synthesize your own decision and decide which is the best way to go forward. So what I do with Beyond Athlete Life is that I'm going to document by making YouTube videos and sharing some posts on Instagram and maybe also on the website, which I'm going to create, which is I'm just going to share, these challenges that I go through as I manage my portfolio companies and as I venture into the world of investing, starting from knowing very little about that world and trying to figure out how you can become a, successful individual investor. So there are these two themes in the project, which is, dealing with everyday challenges in my portfolio companies and learning how to become a successful individual investor. So that's what Beyond Athlete Life is, this kind of documentary or this journey that we take together and we learn together as we go on how to do things better.
Wow. That is really cool. And I like too how you recognized over time of doing it. It's not something that you wanted to just teach people how to do things. You want to document your own life and what you are doing or how you have approached things, and then equip them with the tools to say, okay, I'm going to try it this way, and if it doesn't work, I'm trying another way. But again, it's with that whole mission of how can I equip someone to take just that first step forward. And so Pierre, with how Beyond Athlete Life has kind of come into focus, come into shape, and like you said, you really are starting to narrow down the mission of what you want to achieve with Beyond Athlete Life. Where do you see it growing? Is there something on the horizon, something that's coming up? How do you see it just kind of grow into the future?
I just hope that, athletes can get a different perspective from the way I do things. Because, one of the kind of drawbacks of, having some business experience is the fact that you can get into a new space and have kind of the arrogance of saying, hey, I know how to do things, right? Mm-hmm. So I think what I realized talking with different athletes, and that you cannot realistically say that, hey, this is the way of doing things, because every situation, it's different. Mm-hmm. Every scenario, it's different and unique. So the best thing that you can do, I think, is offer a different perspective. So what I hope that, this project turns out is in a community that follows this journey that I go through, and we collaborate together on generating interesting ideas and really kind of create a useful discussion on, hey, I think this is the best way to do things, and this is why. And I say, okay, maybe I think things differently, but then through the comparison of these different point of views, we can ultimately synthesize just a new and maybe interesting way to approach the project, the process or the problem, and maybe ultimately have, optimize our, collective decision making together through exploring different options. So that's what I'm trying to do, at least so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good. You have a clear vision of how to kind of move forward and where you want to go. And so, Pierre, in the time that you've kind of grown now Beyond Athlete Life, in that vein, have you encountered someone or met a former athlete that their story really stands out to you, or you've been able to help them? And I mean, why does their story specifically stand out to you?
Rather than help them, I would say really collaborate together on really interesting ideas. Yeah. For example, there is this guy called Alex, that he used to be a professional basketball player, and we connected at a moment where he wasn't really sure whether he wanted to go full time or not with his project, which is Athlete to Business, which again another interesting project of helping athletes get into the world of business. And honestly, it was really interesting to talk with him about and compare different perspectives, right? And because he wasn't really sure whether he wanted to get into it. And I just asked him a very simple question. Hey, if you had $1 million, and if you don't have to think about money, what it is that you would like to do, right? And from that simple question, he said, you know what? I just want to get into this because I love it. So I'm going to go and jump into this opportunity. And I think that was one of the the most rewarding moments when you see people that, get inspired or get the chance to look at things from a different perspective and say, hey, I want to maximize happiness in my own life rather than just, like maximizing money. Because, of course, you have to be pragmatic, but also inspired. But I think ultimately, when you do something that makes you happy, I think that's the greatest dividend that you can have. Because it's such a add-on to the quality of life that you have,
Yeah. Right. I mean, I love that perspective, wanting to maximize that happiness rather than just money. So figuring out ways to do that and bringing that together. And I like too how you said it's not that you're helping people, it's that you're collaborating with them. I mean, because again, it's one, you're humbling yourself to the business, the mission that you're on, and to the people, the former athletes and just individuals in transition that are coming to you for help. And so, Pierre, how do you meet with these people? How do you collaborate with them? Do they connect with you on Instagram, on your website? Do you just meet them in person? How do those connections happen?
Mainly, so far, because I've been mainly active on Instagram so far. I'm gonna start a YouTube channel soon, so that's also gonna be another channel to get in touch with me. But mainly a lot of DMs on Instagram. People just coming up with questions and say, "Hey, this is my problem. How can we figure things out?" And I was like, "All right, tell me about it. I can give you my perspective. I cannot again." Because, I really want to emphasize the fact that, my point of view, it's not I don't think I'm an expert. I think I know very little about business relative to what it is that you can know. So, in other words, there is so much that I can learn from other people. So rather than being the one that tells you what to do, let's explore the problem together and let's see whether by combining the two perspectives that we have, you can ultimately gain value from that. So then we have fundamentally a lot of conversations via email or DMs on Instagram or Zoom calls or WhatsApp calls or whichever way you can connect just to discuss and allow the idea to be elaborated and processed and refined ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I love that. I mean, being able, and it is really amazing that Instagram and all the social channels out there really allow that to happen. I mean, it doesn't matter where you live or where you are currently. It's that you can connect with so many different people. So the reach and the expanse that you can have is truly just unmatched.
I mean, it's shocking. To be all honest with you, I've grown my businesses without using social up until literally last year.
Wow.
With my company, we created the first social account last year because so far we've been trying to do a lot of email and cold calling and a lot of referrals, So, but then I said it's such a great opportunity to have a direct one-to-one conversation with someone. And I think social is just amazing, so as a tool for this purpose.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. It really is it's so incredible. So Pierre, I mean, just with this truly remarkable life that you've led, I mean, accomplishing so much and just kind of overcoming odds, walking through the doors of opportunity, doing whatever it took to be successful. And then on the back end too, I mean, becoming an athlete, an entrepreneur, and looking forward, knowing that beyond athlete life is just going to continue to grow and you're going to just keep coming after and succeeding in these goals that you have. I just have one final question that I ask all of my interviewees. What do you want to be remembered for?
I don't know. I just want to, I honestly, it's a tough question. I don't think necessarily remembered. I just want to do my part in leaving the world better than how I initially got into it. It's just, I'm not really interested in fame or being remembered. I just want to see a concrete and positive change in the reality that I live in and knowing that I played a really small part in it because, if athletes ultimately succeed with their businesses, they did it. I didn't do anything. Basically, I just gave them a nudge in the right direction. So I just, want to see a positive change. So I'm not really interested in necessarily being remembered. I just want to see people succeed and be happy ultimately and stable in their lives.
Right. And so it's then, It's so much less about you and your name being remembered. It's so much more about the impact and the empowerment that you're giving to other people. So it's what you're allowing, what you're kind of collaborating with them on and helping them into so that they then can go on and be successful. They then can go on and leave that impact. So it's not about your name. It's about how you're making people feel and how you're encouraging them with that positive impact that you're leaving.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, like, ultimately the name is just a name. It could be Pierre Collura, but it could be, like, I don't know, like Michael Smith. The name is absolutely irrelevant. So it's the impact itself and I think the positive change, if there is, that's the most important thing.
Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest, check out the show notes at keepmovingforward.us. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all things coming out of the KMF Collective Studio. Always remember, you can beat the odds and go the distance if only you keep moving forward.